Hey, welcome back, team, to this next session of QuickBooks Online of Managing Accounts Payable. We'll go through creating our first vendor and editing information to an existing profile to maintain the chapter's accounts payable. We'll also learn to add and track a contractor for special services to further prepare and issue 1099s at the end of the calendar year. Within the accounts payable environment, we'll explore the different workflows available to manage vendor payments that include entering a check or an expense or the option to create a bill for future payment. So let's navigate and open our sample company so that we can explore the accounts payable environment. Now, you'll see that in the accounts payable center, what we kind of went over with in the under the accounts receivable center, there are some commonalities, and that's the beauty of QuickBooks is that they have really tried to make it as user friendly as possible, so that in the transition of going from one center to the next, it doesn't, you're not totally lost and all that stuff. You'll see a lot of common workflows that you can do in both centers. They kind of mirror each other in a sense. And so we're going to just go ahead and hover over to start in the left navigation panel here under the sales listing. Get into the expenses center, which is accounts payable. And right away, you'll notice that there are two tabs here, and we're going to go ahead and focus on the expenses tab, which we currently have open. And here you'll be able to view any transaction that is linked to accounts payable. So you have your credit card expenses or credits, you have cash expenses, bills, checks, and because we are working with a sample company, you have transactions such as purchase orders. Okay, so depending on the level of information you wish to see when you come here, you have your, for example, here dates column, the type of transaction, if there's a number type as well. And then you have the pay information. Then there's this category. So depending if, again, we're working with a landscaping company, so our categories may look a little bit definitely different than this. But you have, for example, categories such as here, like automobile, bank charges, commissions, and fees. And it's, these are all listings as well. So you can add or, um, choose to delete depending on the type of information, like I said, that you wish to see and categorize. Then you have a memo section and the totals column as well. Then under the actions column, you can, depending on the type of transaction you're dealing with, you can choose to continue to work from here. Okay. And just like in the accounts receivable center, you have this little mini icon here where you can choose to select or deselect any information that you wish to see when you come to the accounts payable center. You have the option to export your information to an Excel file or print. Okay. And so let's go over these two fields here on the left side. You have the filter by transaction to view anything in particular that you choose to view or search for. You can change it by the dates or maybe even the payee. Then you have you can either print your transactions or work to select multiple transactions to categorize by clicking on this batch action field of option here. And then depending if you have QuickBooks linked to your checking account and are using it to process check payments, you have this option here to, either print checks, order checks, or pay bills. The new transactions icon, which we'll come back to a little bit in a few minutes. But you do have the option here in case you wanted to, create a bill or an expense or a check payment. All right, so let's touch base on the vendors tab here and just go over a quick overview so that, we know how to familiarize ourselves a little bit more with um, the accounts payable center for your chapter. So you have buckets here, just kind of like, we went over in the accounts receivable center. You have a bucket here of anything that the chapter paid within the last 30 days. And then to the left, you have anything that's currently open, and then anything that is overdue. We're not going to touch base on the purchase order bucket, but that's available for you here as well. And then down below, you have, your vendors listed. You can have contractors here as well. There's phone numbers, there's email, there's an open balance column, and then there's this action column where if you choose to select to create an expense or write a check, for a particular vendor, you can do that all right here. Again, you have the mini icon where you can choose to deselect or select anything that you wish to see when you come here. And then also, if you wish to export your information to an Excel file, that's that there, and then to print as well. And then if we hover here to this batch action, you have the ability to email anyone or to make one of your vendors inactive. You can choose to search for a particular vendor here. Okay. So we're gonna, now that we've kind of familiarized ourselves a little bit with what we see in the accounts payable center, we're gonna start to create our first vendor. All right, and so we're just gonna go ahead and click on the new vendor icon, and we're just gonna go over some of the common fields that I see our chapters use across board just to help maintain the vendor list. Okay, so we're not going to so much work through it, but we're going to just touch base on the fields that are available to you when you're editing your existing vendors or creating new vendors. And so yes, you have the option to add a name or a company. The display name as, that's basically the way that your vendor information will be displayed on your list. If you are using QuickBooks to issue checks, this is the option where you can choose to correct the display name. There is the address information here, and then you have an email field, a phone number, and a fax, also a website. Now, if the vendor has standard billing rate, that's where that would go. And this is the terms, depending on the terms of the invoice. You can choose to select that. Um, the account number field is your account number with them. Now, if a vendor is eligible for a 1099, you can enter the Social Security number here or the tax ID number in this window, and check the track payments for 1099 box to help track all payments and allow you to run 1099s at the end of the year. Now, if you later stop working with a vendor, you can choose to make them inactive here as well. Um, and you have the option to bring in an attachment. And so we recommend using, for example, you know, bringing in W-9s, which we recommend that you request from all of your vendors just for like auditing purposes or, just to help you maintain your vendors list and work with those special 1099 contractors at the end of the year. So we're just going to go ahead and click cancel. And just to show you what an existing vendor looks like, we're going to go ahead and use Books by Betsy, which is one of their sample vendors. And we're going to go through some of the information that you're going to see when you come here. Okay. Um, we're going to go ahead and skim over to our vendor details. And right away, you'll see that this is how the profile information will appear. Again, you can bring in an attachment. You can choose to edit the existing information by clicking on there. Again, if you wish to make a vendor inactive, you can click on this option here. The transactions list, I'm going to go ahead and walk through since we are using a sample company and there are some transactions already listed here. Basically, in this case, we're seeing that there are bill payments, there's bills, there's checks that relate to this particular individual. You have the date, you have the type of transaction, there's a reference number, the pays number name as well, and then the category. There's a memos field, and then a totals column. And then if you choose to make a particular transaction uh, deleted or void, you can choose to do that under the actions column. Then just like any other, center that we're in, you have the mini icon here. If depending on how you wish to see the information when you come to this section here, you can either check or uncheck. You have the option to, export any information to an Excel format or print. And then you have these two options here. So you can filter depending on the type of transactions that you wish to see for a particular vendor. Depending on the date of range, you also have that to modify there as well. And then the batch actions is basically you can choose to select a bundle of transactions to print them or to either categorize them. Um, So I wanted to just get you familiar with, how to create a vendor, what sits in your vendor's profile information. And now I want to take you through some common workflows to help you manage vendor payments. So before I go into those, I want to go ahead and continue clicking through our sample of vendors. Um, just to show you how easy it is to get into certain things. So we are going to touch base on, for example, creating a check payment and or creating an expense or even a bill. So some of the common ways to do that is, for example, let's say we were working with Books by Betsy. You go into this new transaction icon. This is one way to get into those common workflows. Another way to do it is if you click on this new icon, let's say that we're working on a totally different vendor. If you go under your vendors listing, which is your accounts payable center, this is another way for you to get into those common workflows. All right, so let's go back and go into our list of vendors. Now, depending on the type of bill you are working with, you may want to ask yourself what the best source of payment is to enter and what type of tracking is needed. For example, you don't need to enter a bill if you're just making an expense in full the moment you receive it in the mail. Instead, save a step by entering a check or a credit card expense. So just for the purpose of the training, I'm going to go ahead and use the sample company, one of the checks that they've already created. I'm going to go search through the search field here and click on a check debit. And the payee, basically, you can choose a vendor from the drop-down list next, and then next to it is the correct checking account. There would be usually like a mailing address here if if this is a vendor that's existing and you've entered that information in. Otherwise, as you can see here, it's just a basic name to associate with the expense, and then the payment date. They've left the check number as debit. This is most likely the debit card that is linked to their checking account. So this is just one way for them to track that. And then you have under category details, and this is basically you this was their automobile, and then you can add a description. Looks like the amount was 19.99, and then if you want to associate this expense with a specific customer, so that you can do maybe some job costing or track how much you spent for a vendor, you can enter the customer's name right here next to the transaction. Okay, and then you have the option to, build more lines as you wish. The use the item details. Um, section if you are basically buying items that you track in your QuickBooks. Okay. Um, and then you have the option to bring in maybe a memo or bring in an attachment, anything that you can, maybe support in case you need to present it to, your auditors, or you just want to, you know, keep a good track of information for anyone that is going to be working on your chapters QuickBooks in the future. Um, you have the option down here to print a check or order, make this transaction recurring, or even click on this more list of details here and choose to either copy, void, delete the transaction, the check rather, or even view this in a different way where you see your debits and credits. You have the audit history. So, you wanted to see who issued this check, when, if there was anything else that was associated with the transaction, maybe changes to it within, the time frame that it was allowed. That's an option for you as well. And then you have this here at the bottom where you can either choose to create a new check or save and close. So we're just going to go ahead and click on the cancel. And, again, this is just one way to just help you navigate through, managing the different types of payments that are available to you. Again, you have the way of getting into issuing a check by going into the plus new create icon and clicking on the check listing here under your vendors, a list of options. And then, or you can choose to, excuse me, you can choose to, depending on the vendor that you're working with, under the actions column, you can choose to do that as well here. So you can write a check. All right. So now let's get you comfortable with creating an expense. And so let's go ahead and click on one of their expenses. So let's click on credit card expense here. And again, you have the option to choose the payee and then the account associated with the purchase of the expense. There's a mailing address available and a payment date, and then the payment method. So if you paid it with the chapter's credit card or checking, those options are available for you as well. And then any sort of reference, maybe a receipt number or something that you're keeping a log for, that's available for you as well. Again, the category, so we're dealing with a landscaping company, and they issued a payment for some materials here. You have the option to add a description and then the amount. And then again, if you choose to track your vendors, this is one way to do that. And you would add the customer's name here. You have the option also to maybe, again, if you're buying an item or, something like a service, you can choose to work on this section instead of the category by details. You have the option to type in a memo or bring in any support that relates to this expense. If it's something recurring, you can make that recurring. You also have the option to, again, copy, void, delete, or look at um, the transaction by, debit and credit, view, and then audit history. So we're going to go ahead and just, save and close, and then just cancel that. And now we're just going to go ahead and work through the flow of creating a bill. So just like your other common workflows when managing accounts payable, enter bills when you owe money to a vendor that you're not going to pay immediately. So I would use this workflow for larger expenditures to track for the chapter. Okay, so let's get into that. Let's go ahead and hover over to the plus new create icon, and under our list of vendor listings, click on bill. And we're not going to fill in all of the, the fields here, but we're going to definitely walk through it just to get you comfortable with when you're creating a bill. So to fill in, you basically have the option to select from the drop-down menu under the vendors to select one of the vendors that you're choosing to work with or add and create a new one on the fly. The mailing address is there available for you, and then the terms of the invoice. So again, you're working to mirror the type of invoice that you're working with. You have the option. So, for example, here to change the date, and that's the due date's going to be pre-populated for you based on the terms that you selected. There's a bill number, and then the category details as well. There's a description field, there's an amount, and then depending if you wish to track your vendors or customers, you have that option here as well. Um, if the bill is for items received, use the items detail section here and list the products, okay? Um, sometimes when you get into here, this items details option won't be as open, but you have the option to click that, and then you can add in a memo. You can also choose to bring in an attachment. Depending on the level of information that you wish to track, you can basically choose to store the PDF of the original bill from the vendor. You can scan it and add it as an attachment. So you have that option for you. You can also basically either save it, make it recurring, or save and schedule the payment, or just save and select new if you're wanting to create a different one, or save and close. Okay. All right. So we're just going to exit out of there and we're going to say no. Sorry. All right, guys. And so let's get into just a quick recap of what we went over. Again, just that like high level overview. Not to you know give you too much information all at once, but we went over the expense center within QuickBooks, and dived into creating a new vendor and working with contractors. We explored the common workflows used to manage vendors. You want to challenge the best approach to take by asking the following questions like we mentioned. Does the chapter pay at the time of purchase or when it incurs an expense? Easiest thing to do there is to enter a check and to create an expense. Then there's a question of, does the chapter pay later? Or, for example, are we making multiple payments at a time? Then the best approach would be to create a bill and then issue a payment later. So you basically don't need to enter a bill if you're just paying an expense in full the moment you receive it in the mail. Okay, so instead, just save that extra step by entering a check or a credit card expense. All right, team. So, my goal was to help you explore multiple ways to manage your chapter's accounts payable and, to help you work through the existing list of vendors. You can edit existing vendor information to help you track expenses on those billable items. I'll share a little more information on our next session on financial reporting to help you when working with subcontractors, as we mentioned. And, now that we learned what option to select when creating a new vendor. Okay, so please stay tuned for our next session. Thank you.